Right now, Susan. So here's your three, two, one, and go ahead.
Today is February 21st, 2024. We are interviewing Frank Surt. My name is Susan Kendall, and Frank is located in Burlington, Ontario, and we will be speaking in English.
Okay, I'm going to go. We're rolling camera, and three, two, one.
Good afternoon, Frank. It's so great to hear from you and to be with you. I'm wondering if you can just tell us your name, where you were born, and the year.
My name is Frank Surt. I was born in Budapest, Hungary on September 18th, 1938, and it is good to be with you.
Thank you. If you could take us back to your earliest memories, what perhaps your home looked like, or anything you want to share with us?
My first memories are I may have been 3 or 4 years old. I remember my father, who I lost in the war, but I was the apple of his eyes. I remember that. I remember him on his in his spare time taking me wherever I wanted to go. I have odd memories going around the streets of Budapest and walking into grocery stores and going by big barrels and pulling out sauerkraut and putting it on paper and munching it as we were walking along the main streets of Budapest. Um, and remember playing dominoes with him, but I have very few other memories. My memory of my father was that he loved me, and the older I get, the more important it has become, and I guess I have more time to think about it. My memories of my mother, my first memories, are sitting in her lap and listening to anti-aircraft weapons and listening to the roar of airplanes and and trying to, not me but my mother, trying to identify whether they were German planes or Russian planes. Those were really my first memories. We lived, as I recall, in a one-bedroom apartment, and even then, my father was ordered to forced labor, but he would come back from time to time. Uh, then I remember in May, and I almost remember the day, it was May 5th, but don't hold me to it, where we were ordered to move into a Jewish house from our apartment. And I remember sitting, our furniture was moved by a horse-drawn carriage, and I remember it was an exciting time for me. I didn't know what was happening, quite obviously. And I was sitting next to the man who drove the horses, and we ended up in a Jewish house. I remember the address. It was 48A Legrady Caroy Street, uh, and that's where we were until early November 1944.
Can you describe what it was like then?
I have very, very little memory of the time we spent in our Jewish house. I didn't realize. I didn't understand what was happening. I didn't quite understand why we were there, but uh, so I have actually very few memories of our stay. I do remember the day my parents were taken away. Oddly enough, I remember I could almost swear that it was November 6th, 1944. And what happened was they took us down into the lobby of the apartment building, not just my parents and me, but other residents of the apartment building, and then they were taken away. And then here my memory stops. To this day, I don't know why I wasn't taken. I can guess, I've inferred things why I was not taken, but I was not taken. I went back to Budapest. Not that I wanted to go back to Hungary, because I didn't, but I wanted to show my wife Lorraine where I grew up. And I wanted to know because I remember the building, I remember the front of the building, and I remember the lamp that was at the top of the gate. And this was in 2006, and I wandered in the neighborhood, in and out of streets, and finally I noticed the lamp, which had 48A on it. I walked over, and it was pretty much exactly the way I remembered what happened on November 6, 1944, except the lobby was a little bit smaller and the street was a little bit narrower than I remembered. But other than that, I remember everything about the building itself.
Do you remember how many people lived in your apartment or anything like that?
It was a three story apartment building. Is that 3 or 4 stories? So I am guessing maybe 40 or 50 families, but there weren't that many people down in the lobby because it was a small lobby. So some of the people may have been taken before my parents were. That I don't know. My next memory is I was in an infamous brick factory in a suburb of Budapest, and the people who are still alive would remember it, because that was kind of a dispatch point of the deportees. And I found myself there. Now, how I got from the apartment building, the brick factory, I don't know. Again, I can assume that it was the Red Cross. Someone from the Red Cross took me there, but I don't remember. I do remember being there for a couple of days. I remember sleep.
How old were you?
I had just turned 6. I do remember sleeping on hay, and I remember that we were kind of ordered to stand around, and I remember one of the Nazis, one of the Aerocross men stuck one of the adults with a bayonet in the neck, and I remember a lady turning me away from it so that I wouldn't see it. All the memories that stay with you. And then either 1 or 2 days later, someone took me out of there, and I ended up what I assume was a Red Cross home. And again, I assume that the other kids who were my age, maybe a few younger, a few older, were all Jewish kids whose parents were deported. Now, why I wasn't taken away is an interesting inference, and it is truly an inference. I read a couple of books about the siege of Budapest, and obviously the role of Eichmann, But Eichmann had a second in command called Lieutenant Becker, and if you read Kestner's train, you'd run into this Becker character quite often. He and a fellow by the name of Kestner, who was known as Reger or Rudolph or Israel, continued to negotiate with Becker to allow a train full of Jews leave Budapest, and supposedly Switzerland would accept them. As it turns out, as I read later from another passenger of this train, who ended up being a professor of something or other in London, but he was on that train. Who else? And he wrote that the people on the train were, I believe, in Buchenwald for 6 months in a concentration camp because Switzerland was not very quick in accepting these people. I'm kind of rambling on. A person who was whose name you may know was also on the train, and that's Peter Monk. Now, Peter, you may have heard of Peter Monk. Peter Monk ended up being not the major shareholder, but certainly the mover and shaker behind, at one time, the biggest gold mine in the world. Now he died not that many years ago. And again, talking about a small world. After my corporate career, I started consulting, and I was engaged by a lawyer for the Ontario Association for Architects, and that lawyer happened to be a stepbrother of Peter Monk's, and he was also on that train that Kestner arranged. Getting back,
So you were on the train?
I was not on the train. No.
Okay.
No. It was totally off my history. This is information that I picked up from books.
Okay.
My take on why I wasn't deported or killed or managed to stay alive is that in early November, Kestner negotiated with Becker, and that's Becher, to provide some weaponry to the Nazis in return for allowing the train to go. And Becker by then knew that the Germans were losing the war, and he was concerned about his own future. And while Eichmann wanted to kill all Jews, Becker and Kestner apparently agreed that children under a certain age would not be deported. This is not a fact. This is an inference on my part that's how I ended up staying alive. My memories of the next 2 or 3 months are very faint. I recall one incident that I keep telling everybody because it's so unusual. You may know that the siege of Budapest involved basically the Soviet army going from building to building to building. And we spent a fair amount of time in apartment building cellars, hoping to escape the bombardment. And I recall one time we were downstairs in the cellar, and the bombing went on, and the Soviet either one or two Soviet soldiers ended up in our basement. Don't know how. And this guy put me on his lap and gave me 2 sugar cubes. This is something, a memory I'd never forgotten. But other than that, I don't remember a lot.
Do you remember what you ate or what you did?
No,
To keep
I
busy?
don't remember what I ate, but again, when my aunt found me in late January 1945, I had not eaten probably anything for quite a while, and my aunt was told not to bother taking me because I was that close to death, and it was more than starvation. I mean, there was no food in Budapest, so there was. I'm not quite sure whatever little they fed me where they found. Again, it's not something I can remember at all. I do remember my aunt dragging me home in kind of an inverted cupboard. There was snow on the ground, and I remember going by the Eastern train station. So I had very, very little memories of that time. My aunt took me to her mother-in-law, my uncle by marriage, who was Gentile, and he was in the Hungarian army, and a shrapnel killed him, and that's when my aunt started looking for me. In any event, she took me to her mother-in-law's house. I remember the address where she was, and when we were back in Budapest in 2006, I showed Lorraine, this is where I was kind of saved. The lady was told by a doctor not to feed me very much because obviously I hadn't eaten, and a lot of food would not go well down with me. And
What year was this?
I'm sorry?
What year?
This is January 1945.
Okay.
So I'm still 6 years old. On hearing that I shouldn't be fed a lot of food, the lady said, well, if he's going to die, he's going to die on a full stomach. She cooked up 2 cabbage soup. I don't know where she found, and there was meat in it. I assume horse meat. But she fed it to me. I had 2 bowlsfuls, and I ended up surviving. I was also full of wounds, and I don't know whether it was a lack of hygiene or how that happened. I couldn't walk. And at this point, my mother is still not home. My mother is still in Lichtenberg, in a concentration camp. So I had to learn how to walk again. But and again, going back and forth, what I didn't say before is that my mother and father were separated in a march to Austria. My mother ended up in Lichtenberg. There was a concentration camp. They were liberated by the Soviets either late January or early February. My father was in Felixdorf. I believe both of those towns are on the southern part of Austria. We know that my father was alive on January 31st, 1945, because my mother worked for the Joint. I don't know if you know what the Joint is. It's the American Joint Association, and they basically were set up to help Jews everywhere in the world. My mother ended up working for the Joint, and they had access to the list of deportees in Felixdorf. And so that's how we knew, or she knew, that he was alive on January 31st. Again, I don't know where he died or how he died. I assume that they were that the Nazis were concerned about the approaching Soviets, and they decided to evacuate the camp and move him to another concentration camp. And of course, this was a forced march, and I assume that's where he died. So that's pretty much the early history of what I remember up to 1945, from age 3 to 6.
Did you have any religion, any traditions that you recall from those early years?
No, none, and that's because we didn't have any. That I am sure of, and we never. My stepfather later on tried to teach me a little bit of Jewish history, but not from a religious, not in a religious context. My parents and my stepfather were not religious, and so consequently, I grew up pretty much as a secular individual. Between January and February and the time I went to grade 1, I have very few memories. I do recall, though, that because of the wounds, and basically they were on my legs, my feet, and the doctors then couldn't seem to cure it. And one doctor basically said that we need to amputate both legs. And at that time, my mother hadn't been home yet. And my aunt, God bless her, said, I will not take that responsibility on. And so it didn't happen. Subsequently, in the summer of 1945, my mother found a doctor who had access to penicillin, and penicillin was new then. And with the penicillin, the wounds were cured in 2 weeks. So thank you, Aunt, and I've been pretty healthy since. Grade 1 to 8, not much to say. Obviously, we lived under the Soviet regime from 1945 on.
Did you experience anti-Semitism?
Well, that's a totally different topic, and we talk about anti-Semitism. Yes, and this is a general comment, if you are a Jew, and whether you believe it or not, and regardless of where you live, I learned that you are always the other. Regardless, and that applies to Canada, it applies to the US, it's just the way the world is. That's pretty much my opinion, and I'm pretty convinced that it's a correct opinion. Yes, there was Hungary was much more of an anti-Semitic. Obviously, Hungary was anti-Semitic between the two World Wars, obviously, and that's what gave rise to the Arrow Cross, which was the equivalent of the SS. Only they were even, if it's possible, they were even more cruel than the SS. And if you interviewed any Hungarian Jews, they might have mentioned that the Arrow Cross would lined up Jews on the bank of the Danube and shot them into the water, into the Danube River. And these, it went on the war, but in a silent way, under the surface, there was anti-Semitism, and I knew that I was the other, as were my Jewish friends, and most of my friends were in fact Jewish. Anti-Semitism, if we talk about anti-Semitism today, I am not a prophet, but I've predicted that anti-Semitism would rise again, because it's not something that after 2,000 years all of a sudden is going to disappear. And so I am not shocked that we are kind of approaching not the same level of anti-Semitism, but certainly a lot more than I was hoping for when I crossed the Atlantic. I was hoping that I would not encounter it so openly again. So that was the 8 years, 45 to 53. 53, I wanted to go to a high school, a gymnasium, what in Hungary was called a gymnasium, which was a standard high school. Despite the fact that I had the best marks in public school, I was not allowed because my mother wasn't part of the working class. She was a typist. I don't know if you know what a typist is. She was a typist who typed for other people. But that was not considered to be part of the working class, and so I couldn't go to the high school that I wanted to go. I ended up going to a technical school, thank goodness in hindsight, called the Technical School for Building Materials. I went there for 3 years. I was in my 4th year when the Hungarian uprising broke out. And as soon as I knew the border was open, I decided to leave, to basically escape. As it turned out, I escaped with who then was my girlfriend and her family, and I crossed the Hungarian-Austrian border in November, I believe November 4th or 6th, 1956.
Did your mother join you?
No, my parents didn't. I had my mother and my stepfather then. My mother remarried in the late 40s. And so my stepfather basically was responsible for bringing me up. And while he was not a very warm man, he was thankfully pretty strict. And so I ended up kind of on the straight and narrow. If it hadn't been for him, I don't know where I would have ended up. So they didn't come with us, A, because they were not all that well physically, and B, because my stepfather's brother lived in Australia. My stepfather's brother and mother, they lived in Australia, and they kind of committed to bring them out. As it turned out, they backed out of it, and my stepfather died in 1964. My mother stayed alive. I brought my mother out in 1964. By then I was married, but she couldn't get used to Canada, and so she went back a year and a half later, and she passed away in 1996 at the age of 86. So in Austria, we were offered three options. Austria was overloaded with Hungarians in a very short time. 200,000 Hungarians ended up in Austria, and Austria is not that big a country, and obviously, they had just recovered from the Soviet kind of occupation. They weren't loaded with funds to support that many people. So we were offered an opportunity to go either to England, Italy, or France. The family I was with and I chose England, and we ended up in England in late November 1956. Yes, 1956. And then...
Who was the family you were with?
The family is a Hungarian family. They had relatives in England, in Cleveland, and they ended up in Cleveland. And in the fullness of time, we lost touch. It was just that I had met this girl the previous summer, and her mother, when they were ready to leave, they said, "Do you want to come with us?" And I said, "Sure." And so we ended up going. My girlfriend had a sister and a mother, so the four of us were together, mother, two daughters, and me. But in England, we ended up separating because they were waiting to be accepted by the U.S. And of course, I wanted to go to the U.S. too. Candidly, I didn't know where Canada was, and I was convinced that Niagara Falls was in Africa. So geography, obviously, not my strongest subject. And of course, I thought, they said, "Why don't you go to Canada, next door to the U.S.?" They took us down from Birmingham, which is where I was with a family, to the Canadian Embassy. I don't know, we signed papers, and 2 weeks later I was on my way to Canada. Thank goodness.
How did you find that family that you lived with?
I guess the Red Cross or whoever looked after the refugees were assigning individuals or families to English families who were ready to take on some Hungarians, and I think there was some payment by the Red Cross or whoever sponsored this. That's how we ended up with these families, and that was really an opportunity for me to learn English as well as I speak now. But in any event, in May of 1957, I arrived in Canada. Actually, it was May 12th, 1957.
How did you get to Canada?
They flew us we landed in Gander. From Gander, they flew us into Winnipeg, and those of us who wanted to come to Toronto were put on a train, and that was a 2-day train trip back to Toronto. And ever since then, I've been in Toronto and the GTA.
Do you remember anything about the trip?
Well, it was a Flying Tiger airplane, which people familiar with the Second World War, it rang a bell, but that was the first time I flew, and I don't remember very much, obviously. The train trip coming back to Toronto, I do remember going by the Gardiner Expressway, because obviously we went by it, and I remember I'd never seen that many cars in my life. That's kind of my memory of my arrival to Toronto. In Toronto, I guess we were in a Red Cross residence. It was previously a religious building, maybe a nunnery off Queen Street West. And that's where we were. We did not get the kind of reception, and this is not a complaint. We did not get the kind of receptions that current refugees get. We were basically told to get out of there and get a job, and so first thing we did was walked around and got a job, and I was very fortunate. I got a job with a company called Art Bookbinding. This was on McCall Street, and McCall Street, you may know or you may not, is one street west of University. Anyway, it was owned by a Jewish family, and they happened to have a room to rent because they had just bought a home, and they had a room to rent, and so I moved in there. And I lived with them until I got married, and they kind of became my surrogate parents. And in fact, when I got married, it was the Cosmon family, the family I lived with, that gave me away. So I really lucked out when I arrived in Canada and Toronto.
What do you remember about it?
About
Arriving.
To Toronto?
Mm-hmm.
Well, I always liked streetcars. And in fact, one of the things I did with my father, is that I used to ask him to take me on a streetcar ride, and we would take the number 6 streetcar, which had the longest route. And so wherever I went, and even now, whenever we did a fair amount of traveling, if there was a streetcar, or a subway, the first thing I did was I found it and I got on it. So I remember the streetcar. At that time, Queen Street, which is where I spent the first couple of days looking for work, was very much almost like a village street, low-rise buildings, stores along the street. On Sundays, you could shoot a cannon down the middle of the street and wouldn't hit anything. So that was my first impression, and obviously over the last number of years, it's changed a lot and changed for the better. But those were my first impressions. There were very few high-rise buildings then. But that was pretty much my impression. I was glad to be here, I can tell you that. I was glad to be away from Europe. And I actually almost thought that I would never go back. And the only time I went back was when I took Lorraine back just to show her where I grew up. But I would never ever, and I'm talking about continental Europe specifically, because I've been to Britain quite a few times. But I have no desire ever to go back to continental Europe.
And when you arrived, were you able to speak English?
I was able to make myself understood, and I understood some of it, but it was fairly quick that I picked it up. And I needed to pick it up because when I left Hungary, I was in my last year of high school. And when I left Budapest, my mother made me promise that I would finish university. Well, when I left Hungary, I hadn't even finished high school. So I needed to finish high school, but I also needed to work. So I actually ended up finishing high school partially by myself and partially by night school, but mostly by myself. And the one thing the communist regime was good at was education. And so a lot of the grade 13 topics, certainly in the sciences, chemistry, physics, the three maths, I knew most of it. And so I was able to pick them up pretty quickly. And I ended up, it took me 2 years, but I finished my grade 13, finished English, and the two languages, because in Hungary the compulsory language was Russian. The University of Toronto accommodated me and allowed me to write a Russian literature, Russian grammar exam, which I passed. I don't know whether I passed or not. They gave me a passing mark. And so in 1960, the U of T accepted me for what they called was the extension department. And so I started university in 1960. In 1960, the only course that you could take in the evening was a general BA. So I took a general BA. And I finished university in 1965 while working full time, and by then I had a daughter. So I fulfilled my promise to my mom. The education itself, I majored in philosophy. I can tell you it did me no apparent good, except that I was able to get a job because of the university, because the company that hired me in 1965 was an American company, and for the professional jobs, they would only hire university graduates. And so I was able to, I qualified as a university graduate, and that's how I ended up in the insurance business. Now, the insurance company was the Travelers. They since then left Canada and returned. So the Travelers is still in business, although it's probably a little different from the one I worked at. But that's where I basically learned underwriting. Now I'm asked what my occupation is. Well, my occupation is underwriter, but that doesn't mean that those were the jobs that I always had. I guess I progressed over the years, and my last corporate job, I was the president and chief executive officer of an American a small American company. Well, the American company is big. The Canadian branch was small, and I ended up running it between 1998 and 2003. So I am an underwriter. Most of my work in the past was underwriting, but I occupied different positions.
And did you experience any anti-Semitism?
Not at work. And one of the things about the Travelers was that I truly believe that was not an anti-Semitic company. they were so far ahead of the corporate world in many respects. The way they treated their employees, they were that was a tremendous I don't know if it's still the same, but to show you how really great it was, I still have two friends from the Travelers that we worked together 50 some years ago. The way they hired, they did most of the hiring by the people you would be working with. Certainly somebody made a final decision, but pretty much all the interviewing took place by your future colleagues. It was a tremendous company. But no, I didn't. And did I experience overt anti-Semitism in my career? No, I did not.
And when you arrived in Canada, did you experience any difficulties because you were an immigrant?
If I did, I chose to forget it. I don't think I did, but I was so happy to be here that maybe I understood that I'm here. Maybe I don't have the same rights as people who were born. I don't know what was in the back of my mind. This is thinking really of hindsight. I lost the presidency of one company, and some people suggested that this was because I was an immigrant. I chose not to believe that. Maybe it was the fact that the company was looking for a different person than I was, and I was quite okay with that. So no, I truly don't think I was ever. I ever had any. I don't think I ever had any disadvantage because of my immigrant status.
And you said you were married and you had children.
I got married on December 24th, 1961. And the reason it was December 24th was because I only had it was a Sunday. I got married in the Beth Shalom Synagogue. I don't know if it's still there or not, on Eglinton Avenue, and the rabbi who married us was Rabbi David Monson. I still remember that. The reason we got married late December because I had 1 week between the fall season and the spring term at university, and so I couldn't miss any class because, you know, they were basically once a week, 3 hours. So I couldn't miss classes. And I still have and I didn't bring it up, but I still have a photograph my wife took lying down on a honeymoon in a hotel and reading a book on English history. I was studying for a term test that was supposed to happen on January 2nd. Anyway. So we got married. Our first daughter was born on September 10th, 1962, and her name was Michelle. Then I continued on university, continued working. Our second daughter, Anita, was born on May 9th, and May 8th was the time I wrote my last university exam in 1965. So I do remember which was a Friday, and Anita was born on May 9th. And my youngest daughter, Gail, was born on September 12th, 1967. So we had 3 birthdays in September, very close by. Lorraine was born on May 10th, 42, so May was a busy time too. We had Anita's birthday, Lorraine's birthday, and Mother's Day. And incidentally, Anita and Lorraine both were born on Mother's Day, only a day apart.
And did you choose to raise your children with Jewish traditions?
No, I regret it. I did not, and part of the reason is that I was born in Jewish tradition, and I didn't quite know what Jewish tradition was. We did do Passover dinners at the Seligmans at Renee's home, but generally speaking, no. I did not raise them in a Jewish tradition, and I regret it now.
Did you have a relationship with God at all?
No. I am. You can call me agnostic. I won't call myself an atheist because I don't know, and that I think is what agnostic means, not knowing. So far no one's figured out how the world started, how the universe started, and I've watched a bunch of shows on the start and the development of the universe, and no one's been able to figure out how it. I mean, they talk about a Big Bang, but there was something before the Big Bang, and my mind simply can't understand the concept of nothing any more than my mind can understand the concept of infinity. So I am an agnostic. Now, if you
and
I'll be happy to talk about the stuff that does not relate to work. I love the theater, and we used to go to Stratford and Niagara-on-the-Lake quite regularly. I love the opera. We had subscription tickets to Opera Hamilton while it lasted. And in terms of the physical exercise, I did nothing until the mid-40s. In mid-40s, I took up running, and I became totally addicted to running, and I ended up running. Well, I had friends, but we ran for 30 or more years, 6 days a week, and for a period of 10 years, 2 marathons a year. So I ran 15 marathons between 1986 and 1994. The only marathon that I wanted to run but did not was Boston, because while I loved running, I was lousy at it, and I could never qualify for Boston. For the other marathons, you didn't have to qualify. You just have to pay $30 or $40 and show up. So that was basically most of my recreation, and I made some very good friends running. So that's pretty much. I should tell you.
In terms of anti-Semitism.
What would you like me to say? It's 2,000 years old, 2 millennia old. I have basically given up. I gave up a long time ago that it would ever disappear. It may fluctuate. It may become more intense, deeper, or it may kind of subside for a while, but it will never disappear. And as I said before, in my opinion, a Jewish person is not at home anywhere except in Israel. That is an opinion I formed a few years ago, and so far nothing happened to dissuade me from it. And that's incidentally why I am so worried about Israel, because Israel has to be there for the diaspora to go somewhere when anti-Semitism ignites again, and it will. Hopefully not in my life, hopefully not in my children and grandchildren's lives. The only good thing is, and I keep telling them, that because my grandchildren have Gentile fathers, but because of the Jewish tradition, the mother is Jewish, they can move to Israel pretty much any time. And so I have my father's birth certificate, and I will leave it to them as proof that they are in fact Jewish. But that's why I am so worried that this constant warring will end up again dissuading people to live there, because no one wants to live in a constant state of war or readiness for war. Again, that's my opinion. If you're interested in my political views, I don't believe in a two-state system, because for two states you need two states, and so far there's only one state, and the other state doesn't want to recognize the other state. So I'd like to ask the proponents of the two-state solution, name the two states, and good luck to them.
And what do you think about Germany now and their response to anti-Semitism? Did you ever see that coming in your lifetime?
Sure. I don't want to be flippant, but they're Germans. and it's difficult to understand, because they are a cultured country. Because over the centuries, they accepted Jews, and many Jews blended into German society. And so I have difficulty understanding the source of that anti-Semitism unless it's an inherited trait from the 12th century or the 6th century. I don't know. I can't explain it. I mean, Europe otherwise arguably is a cultured continent. But when it comes to Jews, they don't behave themselves. And it's, we speak of the Germans, and my question is, were the Hungarians any better? Were the French any better? Were the Dutch any better? In my mind, no, they weren't. Somebody in Holland betrayed the Franks. So it's in Europe. In my view, anti-Semitism is in Europe's DNA. And I don't think you can erase it. I can hope, but it isn't going to be my time.
And what are your feelings about Canada now?
I am a little worried. I mean, don't misunderstand. I love Canada. I mean, Canada accepted me. Canada gave me an incredible chance. And it's still the best country in the world. But I am a little concerned about the way things are treading. There is very clearly increased anti-Semitism here, and if one watches the news, it becomes pretty obvious that there are an increasing and an escalating number of anti-Semitic remarks on the social media, which I don't subscribe to. But even if you read the newspapers or look on the internet, it's pretty obvious. I don't know the source of the anti-Semitism, but it is clearly increasing.
Mm-hmm.
Whether we'll be able to cope with it and manage it and ultimately reduce it, I can hope, but I don't know. I don't know how you stop anti-Semitism.
I don't know.
I don't know how you stop it. In 2,000 years, no one's been able to, so I don't know how anyone is going to do it in 2024.
Mm-hmm. Do you think that being raised during the Holocaust changed how you view the world?
Undoubtedly. I think it made me understand that first of all, that anti-Semitism is constant. It's just a matter of degree from time to time, but it's constant. I mean, obviously that made it. It's difficult for me to understand the incredible cruelty. I mean, I have difficulty squashing an ant. And so I just don't know how you can do it. How you can be so incredibly cruel. It's not something I can understand. And so you begin to wonder about humanity. I have hope in it, but I don't know, because there are people who can do unthinkable things. It makes me. I guess it makes one a realist.
Are there any other memories or anything you want to share?
Well, the thing I forgot to mention, that my oldest daughter, Michelle, passed away the same day as Lorraine of multiple sclerosis. And that was July 29th, 2019. Lorraine, on hearing that Michelle died, basically dropped dead of a heart attack. So I lost the two of them within an hour. Sad. It doesn't have much to do with. It's got something to do with my life, but certainly not the Holocaust. I can't think of. It's memory is an odd thing. There are things that are extremely vivid in my memory, like the 2 sugar cubes, like being dragged along the Eastern uh, uh, train station. I remember it as it happened like an hour ago. And then I don't remember virtually anything between the time I left or someone took me out of the brick factory until my aunt came for me. Except I remember one thing, we got bombed out of one Red Cross home and we got transferred to another. I remember that. But only vaguely. So yeah.
And do you remember being afraid?
I'm sorry?
Were you afraid? Do you remember your emotions?
I had no idea what was happening.
Huh.
No idea. And by then I may have been starved. I don't know. But no, I actually don't remember being afraid. Even sitting in a basement, which was a kind of a bomb shelter, used for a bomb shelter. I don't remember being afraid. I may have remembered being bored, but only vaguely. I remember lying in the Red Cross home in a bed, but I don't remember the pain, and I must have been in pain because my feet and my legs were full of wounds. So I assume I was in pain, but I don't remember.
That's good.
Thankfully, yeah.
If you don't have anything else you want to say, or perhaps you want to show us your pictures.
Sure, I'll be happy to share pictures. And I'm not quite sure how we're going to do it, but I can certainly share my father's photograph and my parents' photographs. Picture of my 3 daughters. What else do I have in there? Gail getting married, kind of, and again my wedding pictures. I have a wedding album, and I'll be happy to share the photographs in it. One of the things that again you may be interested in, the Cosman family, the family I stayed with for the 5 years between my arrival and my marriage. The Cosman's family's son-in-law was a man by the name of Max Eisen. Now, I don't know if you've heard of Max Eisen. Max Eisen was the Cosman's son-in-law, and Max and I were friends for quite a while. We used to play chess, we used to socialize, and then when we moved to Burlington, we kind of lost touch. But as you know, when he and incidentally, I babysat the twins, Eddie and Larry. I used to babysit them. They were, I can't remember, maybe 6 years old then, and I was 18. So we were pretty close. And Max took me to the first Toronto Argos football game. But when he retired, he ended up going to high schools and public schools even to talk about the Holocaust and talk about Auschwitz. Because as you know, he was in Auschwitz. He also wrote a book. Can't remember the title of it now. I used to have it, but when I moved in here, I had to give up books because there's not enough room. And that book gives the miraculous survival of Max. So that is kind of an interesting acquaintanceship and at one time friendship. And I believe his wife Ivy is still alive. And it's funny, the 2 boys, the twins, who I used to babysit for, I am trying to think, but I'm pretty close. They're pretty close to being in their mid to late 60s. hard to believe.
It is hard to believe.
Yeah,
Max is a wonderful man. Mm-hmm.
yeah. So I'm ready for I have a picture of Mrs. Cosman because she's the lady who, as I said before, gave me away.
Okay.
How do we do it? I think Michelle said he would just take some pictures.
I think he'll just give them to you to hold.
Sorry?
Oh, we're gonna put them on black, aren't we? Should I cut?
Are you talking to me?
No, I'm talking to her.
Okay. Michelle is talking with you, I think.
Sorry, should I cut the camera now? And then
I don't think you have to cut it. You can just give Frank pictures to hold and he can explain each thing.
Okay. Give me a second.
Uh-huh.
Are these the pictures here?
Why don't we get that for the album first?
The album is here.
Not that one. The white one.
The white one? Stay there, Frank. I'll find it. Where would it be?
I brought it out.
Did you? I got pictures here. This, but we can go through some pictures. Did you want me to zoom
No.
in on these pictures at all, or
Well, I'd like to find the
the white album?
it's in a green bag. If you see a green bag,
Oh, I did see a green bag. It's right here.
okay, that's where it is.
Okay. Here we go. Sorry. Here's your.
Okay, let me first of all, let me see what I'm showing.
Okay.
Yeah, I'd love to see.
If you can hold them when you do it, Frank, you can just turn it around so we can see what we're doing.
Okay, so I'm sorry.
Just turn it around so you can point it towards the camera.
In front of me?
Yes, in front of you, sir.
Okay.
Just lift it right up.
Like this. This is a photograph of Lorraine, me, Mrs. Cosman, and Mr. Cosman, my surrogate parents.
You have to twist it forward because of the reflection.
Which way?
Just push it forward so the reflection. And then
What year was that?
1961. December 24th, 1961.
if you hold it like that.
Mm.
There you
Tell me when I can turn it.
go. Yes, you can turn the page, sir. You know what? These would be better on black, guys.
The problem is I can't see.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Can you see it?
I could see it.
This is Mr. and Mrs. Cosman kind of going down, giving me away, walking down the aisle. Well, we don't need to show all of them. This is Lorraine's mom and brother. Got it?
And that's your wife.
This is my bride.
Mm.
Ready?
Mhm.
This is us being married, or I guess by now we're married. And of course, that's the, whoops, this one is going to be tough. This is their traditional first kiss after being married. Tell me when it's done.
Just gonna move the camera.
There should be more photos. I need a photo of my father. Maybe it's here. Yeah, that one. And that one, if you don't mind. Thank you. This is my father.
What did your father do for an occupation?
He was a postal clerk.
Okay.
And he also wrote poetry, but he wasn't a very good poet. This is,
No, twist it
these
forward.
are,
That's it.
these are my parents,
Mm.
mom and dad.
Okay.
And this one may not show up very well. This is a photo I took when Lorraine and I visited the Holocaust Memorial in Jerusalem. This is a memorial in the garden of the memorial, and it's a stone donated by an Australian family to memorialize all of those Jews who have no stones, and we don't know where they are, where their remains are. So this is, to me, a very valuable photograph.
Mhm.
Okay. I don't know if it's worth taking a photo. This is Lorraine and me at my youngest daughter's wedding. A photo of my 3 daughters. When this photograph was taken, Michelle had already contracted MS, but it was in fairly early stages. So these are my kids. I actually have a better picture of my grandkids. Michelle, there is a picture of my grandkids on the back wall on one of the shelves. Thank you. And these are my 7 grandkids. And I think that should be enough. Sadly, I don't have that many. I was going through, I've got 1,000 pictures all mixed up. And one of my projects for this year is to sort through them.
We all have that. Well, I want to thank you so much for taking us back and including us in your life and your memories and your journey.
And thank you and Michelle and Rachel for taking your time, and it's been quite an experience. And now it saves me having to write a long story, which is what I've been encouraged or urged to write. Maybe this saves me some having to write it. But it's sad that I have so few memories of my early years, and I'm not quite sure why that is. But those are the memories are vivid, but they're not many. Yeah. So yeah. So it's been quite an experience. If we did it again, I'd do a better job, but this one will be okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Sure.
And
I'm going to turn the.
My best to the Seligman family.
I will tell them.
Yeah. Thank you. Bye-bye. Bye.
Okay, we're going to cut now. So how do you like living here?
It's okay. It's it's an adjustment. Extent.
Oh, really?
Yeah. And so it's
So it's
and
kind of
I'm just noticing it now. The longer I'm at that, the more I think about it, the less satisfied I am
with what?
with what happened, because
Your interview?
I should have been asked to I had significant reaction to it. I'm disappointed. Now it was not really an interview, and I expected it to be closer to an interview than a recital. Anyway, it's done.